having curated content is not the solution, because the answers go out on the internet right away, and there's no way to lock down everybody's computer, right? You can't lock down people's computer. You can't authenticate the student the way that you need to. So we've started exploring creating our own problem sets and our own exams and our own variations, right? So we can mix the problems up and put things in a process where we do know what the student actually knows. And we've moved some to a variety of ways of assessment, including project-based learning, and also including writing about their work. So it's really great that a math student may know how to solve a problem, but do they really know what it means? And can they apply it? And are they in a place where they can explore it and use it in their career? So we were scaffolding their learning in such a way that they became a real expert of it and they were career ready, instead of just getting a minimal grade and moving on. So we've been expanding in this area for a while now, that the exams are not the only way to do this. They are a piece of the puzzle, but not the only way. Does the exam really tell me what the student knows? Assessments are hard to update and keep current, as we know. We do have ways to vary the problem set amongst a student at a given time, but with technology, our dear friend, it becomes our enemy, because even with that variation, students can still find a way to trick the system. So we've now moved towards designing competency and mastery statements, and moving towards clear expectations and guidelines in terms of projects, where the student asynchronously communicates with the faculty member and writes about their work. And it is extremely painful for math students that have done this in a traditional manner, because they are uncomfortable about writing about math. They're uncomfortable about writing the process of how they did it. Show me how you did it instead of just giving me the answer. The answer doesn't tell me that you know how to do this, or you are career ready or ready for the workplace. So we've been on this journey for a little while now, and we've been working through a number of different ways of doing this. So that was pre-pandemic. The pandemic occurred, and what we found is that the pace of our courses, with all the other things going on in their lives, because we have a more adult learner population, they struggled with getting things done on time. So we relaxed our incomplete policy, we relaxed our due dates, we gave them extensions, we met the student where they were again, and we provided them the ability to have more support. We have a student online learning center where there's tutors available and remote sessions pretty much all the time. We expanded our support. We met the student again where they were at. A lot of professors, because they were also at home, a lot of our faculty started having work sessions where they were available and hosted conversation with them, because in the pandemic, the learner needed something different. They didn't need speed and pace, self-pace. They needed confidence and self-assurance, and they needed to hear someone's voice. So we have been doing okay with that. We've been allowing 30-day incompletes. We moved it up to 60-day incompletes. That was a big mistake, right? But we didn't change the format of our courses at all. And we have, as a result, in September, our enrollment for the new term was the highest ever. We admitted 20,000 students, because students were available and wanted to focus on themselves and learning. So our successes, I guess, is that we increased our population base, and that we didn't lose students, we've gained more. So that is currently where we are, kind of pre and post pandemic, and I can expand on any of that you'd like to know more about.
Thank you, Susan. And, I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold them, and I'm sure many of us do. I'm going to hold them to the end. So let's now hear from Stefania from ASU. So historically at your institution, what has assessment looked like pre-pandemic?
So first of all, we've been using WeBWorK in the school since 2000, when John Jones, whom I think many of you know, first introduced it to the faculty. And right from the start, faculty were quite excited about it. And we started using it in virtually every lower division course. Then in 2007, I took over from John. And currently I'm responsible for creating courses, uploading rosters, fixing and reporting bugs. Our IT team takes care of upgrading WeBWorK every year, which is great because I don't know much about server stuff. So. Now, in recent years, I guess I have to differentiate between lower level and upper level courses. Because for college algebra or college mathematics, so lower level courses, we implemented a hybrid model. And for that, we're using Alex, which is an adaptive online learning system. And for other lower level courses, such as business calculus and calculus for life science, we use the publisher products like MyMATLAB or WebAssign, so that students can take advantage of features such as step-by-step interactive tutorials and all the other stuff that these products offer. Now, in 2013, that's when we started we started the online program. The engineering actually started first, developing an online program. And so we had to develop an online version of calculus. And at first we adopted WebAssign, but then we realized that there weren't many advantages compared to WeBWorK. And also, most importantly, we had put so much effort in writing problems with solutions, but we just didn't want to lose them. However, because it was a fully online course, before we were just using WeBWorK for homework, but now that we were going fully online, we had to use it also for tests and assignments. And that created a whole series of problems. I guess I'll go into detail more later. So anyway, also for differential equations, linear algebra, discrete math, which went online shortly after, we did the same. There weren't many choices as far as other online systems compared to WeBWorK for these courses. So we just developed our own stuff in WeBWorK. Currently, we have about 8,000 students that are using WeBWorK, and 2,500 of those are fully online, either iCourse or OCourse. And honestly, the difference between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, of course, for online courses, fully online courses, there wasn't much difference. So everything stayed pretty much the same. For in-person courses, the main difference is that now more and more instructors are testing via WeBWorK also for, well, in person, of course, sync, Zoom courses, right? But most of them now use WeBWorK for tests. And that actually puts a strain on me because most of them is the first time they're using tests. And there are plenty of technical issues. So anyway, that's the current state.
So thank you, Stefania. So in fact, that was leading me kind of to the next question. So you have 8,000 students using WeBWorK, 2,500 fully online, and more and more are relying on the technology. So why don't you share with us if you have any challenges? What is working well? What kind of challenges are you facing? What are those pain points?
Okay, so pain points. The pain points are actually mainly regarding gateway quizzes. Since we started in 2013, so that's 7 years ago, I guess they weren't gateway quizzes were, I don't know when they were first introduced, but I mean, it was the beginning basically. So first, the first hurdle was the fact that gateway quizzes require a proctor and a password. Well, we did not want that. We just needed the password because it had to be compatible with our remote proctoring system, which, by the way, is, I think, a very robust proctoring system for online because it records both the desktop and both the students and the desktop. And it also enters the password automatically, so the student does not know the password. This is only for online though. For in person, we use another proctoring system. So anyway, we had to get around that, and Gavin La Rosa reached out to him, and he was very nice. He gave us a fix for that, which is actually not too hard. We just had to edit PM file in WeBWorK. The second main thing was for linear algebra. At the time, virtually all the linear algebra problems, specifically those using answer array extension, did not work in gateway mode. And so we had to rewrite virtually all of them, which was a major undertaking. Now, the problems that we wrote then are, I'm sure they're obsolete now, but they still work. And so we're still using them. I guess after doing so much work, we don't have the energy to rewrite them again so that they're up to date. And they actually, related to that, still now in the library, once in a while, we run into problems that work absolutely fine in homework mode. But then as soon as we put them in the quiz, they don't work. They don't work as expected, or they throw in errors. Now, I always warn the instructors to try taking the test themselves before they assign it, but of course, to make sure that everything works. But most of them don't even bother to do that. So it would be great if we didn't have to worry about that, if we could rely on the library problems being, working in both homework and gateway mode. Then there's also the issue that, so for our tests, online tests, and also I guess for the quote unquote in-person courses now, we usually give 2 attempts just so that we can give the opportunities. The students can click twice on grade test. I guess you did the same, right, for your final. Now, the problem is that if a student opens WeBWorK in another window while taking the test, which of course they're not supposed to do, but also if a student is disconnected while taking the test, well, first of all, they don't realize they're disconnected. They keep entering their answers, and then they click on submit, and WeBWorK hasn't recorded anything because there's no communication between, with the server, right? Even if they're disconnected for 5 seconds. And so we get plenty of emails from students complaining that their answers have disappeared, quote unquote. Now, we can check the logs. And of course, all the instructors can check the logs. By the way, that's another advantage of using the password. Using Proctor, gateway mode, because the logs explicitly tell you when the student accessed the test. But of course, who checks the logs? Me. All the instructors tell me, Stefania, can you check this student? Can you check that student? That's definitely a pain point. And then the other issue, of course, was that WeBWorK was allowing students to submit their answers even after they went over time, when we were allowing multiple attempts, or when they did not click on grade test at all. Now, that we also fixed thanks to a post in the WeBWorK forum. By the way, thank you so much to all those that post questions and answer questions in the post. It has been really invaluable throughout all these years. And then, of course, this semester we have another issue because because of all the in-person students that are testing, now for the online, we give, let's say, a 24-hour window for the students to take the test. They can take it at any time during those 24 hours. However, for in-person, because the remote proctoring system is not as robust, we give them, we ask them to take the test during class time. And so, of course, we have 80 students at the time, clicking and accessing the test at the same time, clicking on the infamous preview button at the same time. And so now we're having also stuck issues or overload issues. And of course, what do the instructors do? They email me, Stefania, what's happening? Another pain point, and I hope maybe, I don't know, some of you can help here, is that ASU is not allowing us, we're using Canvas for our learning management system, and the ASU is not allowing us to do a WeBWorK Canvas integration. Well, I shouldn't say it's not allowing us. There are so many layers of security checks, and because it's open source, I have no idea how to answer those security questions. My IT team, my unit IT team has no idea either. And so we just basically gave up and told them, okay. We have Moodle, and some instructors can use Moodle, but for that we do have the integration. But for online courses, we must use Canvas through ASU, and for that, of course, we cannot do the integration because we just cannot answer the security questions that ASU wants us to answer. I think that's it. I have a wish list that I could go over. I didn't put it under the pain points. I would put it under the ideal world. But
yes, that's coming next. Absolutely. Well, what I can say, Stefania, is we're so glad to have you here because you're vocalizing a lot of the issues that many of us are facing, the issues with the integration with the LMS. You heard from Bianca at Queensborough yesterday, how she navigated that whole minefield. She spent lots of time going through hurdles with CUNY Central, the central organization, and Blackboard and WeBWorK, and she managed to get through it. So maybe you can take, information from her, and the WeBWorK executive board as well can help you out with that. So you have a lot of people on this call that could potentially help you navigate that. We also we're hearing you when it comes to the issues with the auto submit and the spamming the preview button. Yesterday you heard the talk from Joe Anderson Macias of Redderly, and he talked about, navigating the stress testing and using JMeter to have automated scripts and to do that kind of work to anticipate the load that you're going to have ahead of time so that you can better allocate resources. So again, we can absolutely follow up with a lot of these pain points that you're introducing. So you're in the right spot. I do want to mention that right after this panel, Redderly is going to be presenting their final exam services package. You're doing a demo. They've solved a lot of these pain point issues with their software, and their engineering team has been thinking about this and focusing on these issues because, as Jake mentioned, they've been taking feedback from the community, specifically CUNY faculty, and all the pain points that you're vocalizing now, we vocalized to him already and said, please help us. And so he's been working on these things, he and his engineers. So you'll hear from him, you'll hear from the WeBWorK community. So this is just great that you're kind of itemizing these things that are giving you trouble because we're also struggling with the same. So you mentioned a wish list. So we outlined historically what's been done. We talked about the transition to what happened during, my apologies, let me do this. We talked about the transition through the pandemic times. And so, now thinking about what can we do? What is the plan for the road ahead of us. We do know that for a while, we will be working remotely. We will be teaching remotely. The online arms of your universities are going strong. You're having record enrollments. So moving forward, what would you like to see in an ideal universe from the technology and from the assessment? What would you like to see? And do you have any ideas of how you can get there? So why don't we start with Sue for this one?
Yeah, that is absolutely a great question. I think we are all spending more of our time figuring out tech support and how, you know, we're encountering it instead of teaching. So we're no longer helping the student, but we're becoming technology support desks within our own units. And we have tech support, and they are in over their head with trying to help students. It's not unique to any one system. We as well have gone through a number of different models trying to figure out, do we create a virtual lab and take care of the virtual lab, but we found there's tons of pain points with that. Doesn't matter what product you have. All of the learning resource vendors are having similar types of problems. So we as well have used My Math Lab, and we've used all of the curated content. We have been using Alex for a while, but found for the Alex system that it's very, very hard for students to navigate. So we pulled back from Alex. And being a larger university, we don't get the opportunity to redevelop. We don't have as much control in our online space, which is why we're partnering with our campus space so that we can get to this point where we have our own content. So we don't get the opportunity to change too much, but in the past year, we have gone to more OER. But we find that unless we have control over that content, it changes faster than because we're bigger and like a steamship, we don't move as quickly, right? So I really would like to see more of the technology aspect resolved. Technology support is absolutely everything. If without that, the opportunity, we can't even select the opportunity. So I also think in the world of assessment that we have to get creative about how we're assessing students and what that means. And if we stick to an assessment model that is, you know, a direct assessment where we have them take an exam, obviously they can't all be hitting the server at the same time. It doesn't make sense, right? Because that would mean for us, that would be very critical. We could turn the lights out here in most of the United States. So we have to be super careful with that. So I think we have to take the technology that we have and figure out a way to implement it that makes sense, right? Meet the student and the technology where they are right now. My fear is that we're going to solve the problem in a pandemic time and then go back because we're people. I hope I'm not sitting in this remote office for more than a year. I don't know if I could do that from more, right? So I think our students are the same way, and we will go back to our interface and interaction because we're humans, right? So I think we have to pay attention to what we're doing now and plan for when we return. Because if we build it too much towards the future with us all remote, we're building the wrong solution.
I think you bring up so many important points. We also are in a similar situation at CUNY where we feel like we move. You mentioned that you feel like you're on a steamship. We always joke around that, you know, the pace of change at CUNY, because we're 24 campuses tied together in a system, we say that the change is glacial, right? But the pandemic has accelerated a lot of positive change, and a lot of it aligning with OERs, creating our own custom content that we own, that's secure and safe, that's tailored to our students, these kinds of things. So we hear a lot of what you're saying. And also, you know, what you brought up, that if we solve this problem for being in a pandemic situation, this will not be forever. Whatever solution we create, we go toward the future. So that was really wonderful. Thank you, Susan. So let's hear from Stefania. In an ideal world, Stefania, in an ideal world, Stefania, what would your assessment look like at ASU? And moving towards the future, what do you plan to do so that you can get there?
Well, I mean, for me, the major issue, which I guess, did I mention already? Well, is the proctoring part, guaranteeing the integrity of the assessment. I'm really curious to see, I think we're going to talk about that in the next panel, right? Now, of course, the randomization in WeBWorK and creating test banks do help, but students still find a way to cheat the system, and I have no idea how. I mean, we know they cheat, but we do not know how, and it's just driving us crazy. Now, I saw in the chat there was a question about which remote proctoring system we're using for online. We're using RP now, although now we're in the process of changing. So I guess ASU has invested quite a bit of money on proctoring because we have such a large online population. I mean, ASU is putting a lot of resources into guaranteeing academic integrity. So RP now, the way it works, as I said, it records the webcam, it records the desktop, it inputs the password through the system, so students don't have access to it. So it records everything, but then the recordings are reviewed only afterwards by people, by somebody. And then the reports are submitted from these proctors to review the videos, and they are provided to the instructors. So the students are graded as suspicious or rule violations and so on. And instructors can also review the videos on their own, of course. For in person though, of course, this was not important at all pre-COVID because the tests were done in class, right? But after COVID, of course, as I said, we went online also for in person, and we couldn't use the same remote proctoring system that we were using online because it's too expensive to adopt for the whole for all students. And so we're using Respondus lockdown browser, which locks the browser, yes, and records the student, but it does not record the desktop. So in theory, a student, maybe I should not say this here since it's recording, who knows who's gonna see. I mean, and we have to provide the student with the password. So the student enters the password. And I mean, who's to say is actually the student who's taking the test? Nobody. So, I mean, proctoring is an issue because I know there's cheating going on. And honestly, even with the online proctoring system, which I just said, it's more robust. I mean, we still cannot actually prove that a student cheated. Now, of course, we can do, now thanks to Zoom, before we were using Adobe Connect for interacting with students, which was a pain. So anyway, we can actually do one-on-one interviews like you talked about yesterday. But still, I mean, we managed to take actual action. I mean, there are very few cases that actually go, oh God. There are very few cases that actually go all the way to the deans of students, let's say. Now, improvements specific to WeBWorK first of all, you already mentioned the auto submit. I know everybody wants it, so of course we do too. And another thing that might help with the server overload, and also actually might help to limit cheating opportunities, is being able to submit in WeBWorK one question at a time. I know we can see one question at the time, but the grade button at the bottom, grade test, grades all the questions at once. And I'm afraid that if we deploy the test like that, it's just going to create confusion. Students are going to click on grade thinking they're only grading one question, instead they're grading the whole thing. So what else? I don't know. Oh, maybe we could have a clone of Andrew Parker here at ASU. I would love that.
Sorry, Stefania, he's ours. Yeah, we're so fortunate to have Andrew Parker. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing. I know that, you know, I have tons of questions, but I'm sure our audience have tons of questions. And I definitely want to spend time allowing people to ask you questions so that you can engage with them. So before I hog any more of your time, let me open it up. So why don't we take some questions from the audience?
Oh, actually, before, I'm sorry, I forgot. In an ideal world, I would also like to get rid of Course Hero or Chegg or websites like those, because they post tests, solutions, to labs, to assignments, to everything. And so we always have to be on our toes and constantly create new stuff.
I agree with you completely on that. That is like removing some of the barriers or some of the supports that students shouldn't have. It should be illegal. It should be totally illegal to even operate that way. It's not an authentic way to learn, and it's beating the system in a bad way. And so the president of SNHU has actually partnered with Course Hero to try to get them to stop.
Yeah, and so right now, lately, we are putting, I mean, our syllabus, we're warning the students that if we find out that you post something on this site, something that you are not supposed to, you are going to be prosecuted for academic integrity violation. So, because that's the only way, I think, to try to solve, at least in part, this problem. And we have to do it through the students. Because, I mean, the companies, I don't think we're going to get it anywhere.
Thank you. Suman, do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I just put in the chat, I think Susan McKenzie mentioned earlier about adding more writing components into the assessment. And so, yeah, if you could talk about that. And then I think, Mariana, you've worked with writing across the curriculum at City Tech, and I wonder if there's some overlap there.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And then Edward as well afterwards. Thank you. Please, Sue.
Some of the easier parts of it that I've been able to work on is writing and statistics, because there's such a big overlap. So that was my first really easy challenge. Students hated it. Absolutely hate writing because it's a math course. But I asked them to talk about the population and to tell me more about the populations and to write about what it means. What questions do you have? What does this mean? What does it mean? And we started with statistics, and what we did with that is we had a project that the students created, and I was grading along the way. So I graded their introduction, I graded their paper along the way, and I gave them feedback and gave them credit for taking my feedback and correcting their work. So I made them learn through their own learning, you know, through that model. And I developed a relationship with them through writing, and I commented about their writing style and how they wrote and what their views were. And I really built that student relationship. I'll tell you, it was very hard for them to cheat when they had to submit a writing component week after week to me, where they showed me their equations. Even if it was handwritten with a picture, I didn't care, right? Doesn't matter how you show me it. It doesn't have to be perfect. But I also have extended that now to our calculus course, our introductory calculus course. We've been having the students, instead of them submitting many examples, right, of how to solve a calculus problem, a variation. Instead, what we've done is have them do a targeted handful. I'll give you a targeted handful of calculus problems and tell me what it means. What does it mean to achieve a limit? What does it mean to do an integration? What does that mean? What does it mean in real words? And once we got the student to slow down, and instead of just thinking they had to solve a ton of problems, I made them think about it. They still don't like it at all. So that's how we've been doing the writing part, and that can be done in any of the the LMSs. There's wikis. We've got tons of technology tools that I feel like we don't take advantage of. I'm very interested in exploring WeBWorks for our higher level calculus classes, because I can't do what I want to do with the system that I have. I think that writing is part of it, and I think that collaboration amongst us as a community is everything right now, because as Megan Sawyer had said yesterday, we have to decrease the cost of education. We have to decrease the cost of education. It's too expensive, and our biggest expenses in the online world are trying to find a solution through the curated content, or outsourcing it to a publisher. It's just, we're smarter than all of that put together, right? So we can solve it ourselves if we figure out how to craft the system.
Thank you so much, Sue. And I've had a similar experience with my students, because I also incorporated a lot of writing into my courses. Like I said, I was the coordinator of the Writing Across the Curriculum program. And I think that we could possibly have a whole other session on that. If anybody wants it, I'd be happy to. Sue and I can talk through more details, logistics, how do you scaffold, combinations of high stakes and low stakes opportunity for writing to get to the conceptual understanding. We'll put that on the burner. We'll talk about that in future directions, but I think a lot of people may be interested. All of us are saying over and over again that we need multiple modalities. Just having, an online system grade a question for us, that's not enough. We need the discussion surrounding the mathematics. We need to see the written work. We need the pedagogy that goes around it and the community that surrounds it. So that's why I wanted to give Edward a chance to ask a question.
Oh, I think he had to leave.
Oh no. Okay, let's see it in the chat. Did he put the question? He did not. GitHub is wide open. Oh, this is not it. This is a different thread. How do we say, oh, maybe here. GitHub is wide open. They can always read the code of the problems. How do we safely share the problems? What are your thoughts? Any thoughts from our panelists? I do know that Andrew Parker may have a thought on that. So does Danny, I'm sure.
Well, if no one speaks up, I'll jump in.
Okay.
This is, I know Mike Gage, I don't know if he's here yet this morning, expressed sort of the same thing I did, which is if students are able to read Perl code and or install their own WeBWorK installation, then they're probably sophisticated enough that we're not actually preventing anything by posting the code. Anything that a computer can grade can be beaten by other things. So by not making the problems publicly available, I think we're doing our community more of a disservice if we make it too hard to share our content with other institutions. I think that's more of a negative for the community than it is saving students from cheating.
Yeah, but can I say something? I mentioned the forum, the WeBWorK forum. Students read it too. And so every time we post a question about a bug that, like for example, the one I mentioned that they could submit afterwards. I mean, the students knew before I did that they could do that. It's just crazy. The time they spend to find ways to cheat instead of studying.
Do you think it has a lot to do, so we're trying to solve a problem that maybe has a different solution that's needed. So I tend to think that the value of learning and that the value of being in that space where you personally achieve things, that whole self-efficacy and that desire to learn, it's something that we need to really help students to want. And that I think is a huge challenge, getting them back to the place where, as a student body, that's valued.
So, I mean, I'll throw my experiences in there, and that is that this varies hugely depending on the demographic. Because I've taught everything from high school upgrading courses to, second year engineering calculus courses. And the worst cohort from my experience are the non-math and sometimes even the non-science majors that are forced to take calculus. In the States, it's probably also in the algebra and pre-calculus stream, who just need this as they see it to fill a requirement. When I teach engineers or upgrading students, they have a goal in mind. They see the value of math as something that they can use at least for the next course, even if it's not in the real world. Whereas, our business majors, and I'm always end up picking on the business majors, they don't think they're ever going to need it. So all they want is a grade in this course. And they don't care how they get it. They want what they believe to be the least amount of effort to get that passing grade. And again, it is a hard problem. I don't see how we change that attitude or that approach.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I actually love teaching. Well, luckily I teach upper division math courses. Anyway, electrical engineering, I love teaching online because of the demographics. I mean, there are students, there are older students, younger students, but they all really want to learn. Maybe they're taking the class because they need it to get a promotion, to better their job. So, I mean, the questions that they pose in a discussion board, they are a completely different level than the questions that I get from, younger kids or like you mentioned, or how do you do this problem? I mean, the questions from the online students are actually, okay, why is this? Why is that? So I actually enjoy teaching online more than I enjoy teaching what we call the I course, which are on-campus students who actually take the test their course completely online.
Interesting. Carl, you had a question.
Not so much a question as a comment regarding the entire cheating thing. There's a lot of resources in other disciplines where people are talking about this that I think the math and science community is often not aware of because we have a different modality. We're neither giving multiple choice tests necessarily, nor are we asking for long essays. That's where a lot of the discussion is going on about this. But I just want to make people aware that there is that discussion. And James Lang at Assumption College has written some very interesting books on such things. And his basic thesis is the incentivization. What sort of assignments are we giving? And are we giving ones where the incentive is essentially to cheat, which is a hard thing to hear because, sometimes those are the easier assignments to give. It's very, very I can't believe those of you who are doing Zoom interviews with every student, like how that's possible time-wise. It's a huge investment. But I think that in the end, as a math community, we're going to have to deal with that together because without changing what some of the incentives are, Wolfram Alpha can always solve the problem. Or somebody can always upload to something like Chegg. If my Chinese students can get around the Great Firewall, then I think that students are going to be able to, figure out how to cheat. So what I encourage us as a math community to think about the incentivization. What kinds of questions are we asking? What kinds of assessments are we doing?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Carl. And I think also something that we should not ignore is what motivates students to cheat. If we understand why they got to that point in the first place, that's the first step to address cheat. That's not their mindset. They feel sometimes panicked. They have, they have a course where it's really high stakes that they need to move on, or they need a certain average in order to get it to a specific program. And they feel perhaps not confident with their own voice when they write or when they do math problems. So there are so many factors that goes into a student getting to the point where they feel they have no other alternative but to cheat. And so if we're cognizant of this and we're aware, we can develop effective assignments so that it really mitigates some of these issues.
I agree with that completely, Mariana. That is like one of the biggest things I think is challenges us. And I have taught, night school face-to-face for adult learners as well. And I used to have the students that came in that were so nervous. You could tell, right? So that's the disadvantage of being online. I can't tell. They'd be so nervous. They would sweat as they came into the classroom, and you would just be like panicked. And I'd pull them aside at break and I would say, what's wrong? What's the matter? You can do this. And they'd be like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. But they had to tell me because I was in front of them, right? Because we're human. And I'd say, if I can get you to a C, would that be okay? Go figure out your GPA. Can I get you to a C? And they'd say, you can get me to a C. I've already taken this class 3 times. I'm like, let's see how we can get you to a C. And they start getting good grades. They'd stop worrying and they start doing the work. And they'd come back and they'd say, Professor, how can I get to a B? And I'd say, I'm sorry, we only negotiated for a C. And they used to, and they'd be like, no, I want to do better. I'm like, well, what do you think now you could do to get that grade higher? And once they got past the fear of learning and that fear of not making it, I could not believe how people performed. And I think that has just so much to do with everything we do.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Sue. I feel that we have so much to learn from each other. So this is such a great discussion. Yes, Daniel.
I have a question, and it's related to WeBWorK, because I'm in the middle of administering a test. And as somebody else mentioned before, I tried to test myself. I created a phantom test. It wasn't even a test, it was just a problem set. So I went over it just to make sure that it works. And usually I use WeBWorK quite a lot, like in every lecture, unless if the server is not down, I'm gonna use the WeBWorK in every lecture. But the problem is that now that at QCC we've reinstalled the WeBWorK server and it works fine, I was wondering if it's possible that for one student not to be able to log in. Our protocol is that students log in on Blackboard, and when I post the assignment, it takes them straight into the WeBWorK. When I post an assignment or a test, it takes it straight into WeBWorK, so students don't have to log in. So is it possible that it works, but for some students doesn't? I mean, I would say no.
Daniel, the answer is yes, unfortunately.
Oh.
There's definitely some things that go wrong in LTI. There are some reports about students with foreign characters in their names, and then the back end, not the database or something not working if it's not really fully installed for internationalization. There have definitely been cases of things that work for 99% and some student goes wrong. We had a strange issue where there's a system issue in Moodle. Some student was identified as the guest user in Moodle because the ID numbers crossed. And he couldn't get into what he needed to either.
Yeah. And speaking of servers being down, thank you. I'm supposed to give a computer science test. I use the CS50 ID, which is also down. So, yeah. So.
Well, actually, thank you, Danny. So this actually segues nicely into our next discussion. So speaking of all the pain points and the requests for updated features, so we have